Hi, everyone. It is so wonderful to be here with you all. Welcome to the class I titled Alchemy and Manifestation, Harnessing Your Power of Infinite Supply. So for me, there's a lot encased in that title, which I'm going to go through step by step. So first, my name is Julie Upton, and I'm coming to you from an island north of Boston in the United States. It's called Cape Ann, and specifically, I'm in Gloucester, Massachusetts, which is the oldest seaport in the United States. I love my little island. So we only have a short time together, so I'm going to jump right in. The information that I'll be sharing with you over the next 60 minutes is rooted literally in the root chakra. Because we're working at the core, which is the foundational work, in order for us to have a strong house that's going to last through the time, then we need a strong foundation. Okay. So this means that we'll be attuning our roots with the nature of what we are, including the infinite and the finite. This will work at cutting the cords of fear, which, as we all know, can block our abilities to move fully forward into our infinite supply and full magnitude. So let's start by taking a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth 3 times to calm the nervous system and get present. Okay. So I want to start by telling us that we're all in the perfect space right now. You don't have to figure anything out here. I ask that you just be in your heart and open to receive. Let whatever wants to come through, come through. I am not sharing anything new to you. I believe that we are all incredibly powerful beings, that we all have all the wisdom within us, all the wisdom of the universe within us, and that we're in this human manifestation to simply remember who we are. Behind the identification with the self, with the personality, and with the likes and the dislikes, and all the fluctuations that happen within the mind and the body and the spirit. So my work, like all of us, is to speak from my heart with no judgment. And here's the kicker. You may not be here to simply consume content or to learn something. You may be here tuned into this just to jog your memory. Also, this information could be coming through right now just so that we can all sit in the vibration and the frequency of it and magnetize it for the collective. So that's why I don't want us to sit here. This is what I used to do in classes all the time. I know, I know, I know. I know all this. I know all this already. Well, we don't all know everything. And it's also not necessarily just about us consuming content. It's also about us being together as a quorum, as a group, as a mastermind. Because as we're sitting here and being together, we are syncing up energetically. And so, as we are allowing the information to come through, because this is not information that I have made up, this is information that is coming through me. And it's not just coming through me for me, it's coming through me for everyone, for the collective, to raise the vibration of myself and each and every one on the planet. So it's a big story, right? So, as I said, my job is just to allow the information that wants to come through. And it's our job together to allow that to happen, to receive it, because I'm receiving it as much as you are, and then to integrate what works for us. And if something doesn't resonate, I urge you not to just throw it away. I urge you to put it on a shelf because you may want to revisit it later. Okay, the mind is a tricky place. It's going to want to do a lot of gymnastics. That's usually the case. So, as I said before, I believe that we're all wisdom beings, that we have all the knowledge of the universe within us. But there's a lot of layers over that we need to uncover in order to experience our full magnitude, our full presence of being. We have built up these layers over time, over lifetimes. We've also knocked them down. We build, we knock, we build, we knock. It's a cycle. It's like a contraction and an expansion, contraction and an expansion constantly, just like the breath, because the universe is breathing. And infinity is constantly expanding. Okay. So these layers are built up and knocked down lifetime after lifetime due to stories, emotions, experiences. What we're doing is we're creating patterns. So basically, through energy, vibration, and frequency, we're creating different types of patterns, and then we're acting them out to learn about how we do that process so that we can master it and what I call winning the game of being human. Okay. So that brings me to telling you a little bit about myself. So I came from a very, very, very intense family life as a child, as a lot of us have. And my personal mind was like, if this is love, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Like, this is crazy. Like, why would anybody want to go to school, torture themselves with school, and more school, and more school, meet a guy, fall in love, get married, get a house, have children, get old, get sick, and die? I literally had those thoughts. And so when I was 22 years old and I was standing behind my chair, as I was a hairdresser back then, one day I was 22 and I was like, is this it? And that whole scenario ran through me. And with every fiber of my being, I said, no. And in that moment, I asked myself, well, if money was no object, what would you do? And the first thought that came to my mind was move to California. And I remember I thought, well, that's doable. And I came from like a small town in Massachusetts, and I was different. But I had a sister who was 7 years older than me, so quite a bit older. And she was also a professional figure skater and traveled the world with that. And I was also quite a traveler. Even when I was a little kid, I used to pack a bag and I used to just maneuver myself around. I was always constantly traveling. And of course, my parents, they took us traveling and stuff. So I was familiar with it. So in that moment, I made the decision to move to California, which is the complete opposite side of the United States. And that's when my journey began into myself. Now, I didn't have words for it back then. So, and words are, I don't like to get caught up in the words. So I've been a serious seeker since I was 22 years old, and I'm 49 now. I'm actually almost 50. On my 50th birthday is this summer. So crazy. So as soon as I stepped out of my ordinary daily routine, I was free to explore. And that's what I did. So basically, every single day since I left home at 22, I have been exploring. And I really believe that this life is an adventure. It's an experiment. It's a deepening and an expanding. It's also a contracting. But as I have grown into myself, I do less contracting and more expanding. And I'm constantly giving myself more room to expand. So that's really what this talk is about at the core. It's about understanding contraction and expansion, and how when we feel contraction, it's a pointer to go deeper into that aspect of being in order to bring more energy and higher frequency and vibration in, and then to be able to expand out so that more light, more energy, a higher frequency can come through. And that's why I'll be talking about the four bodies, because in order to expand even wider, we really need to understand these four bodies. So that takes me to my why. Like, everybody has a why. That's the most important thing that we have, is why we're doing what we're doing. And it's like, I am so obsessed with enlightenment, like fully obsessed with knowing everything there is to know about being human. And so the word that kept coming up over and over and over when I was asking myself, or God, or source energy, like, I want to get to the highest place that I can in this lifetime, the word enlightenment kept coming up. So eventually I've been doing yoga since I was in my early 20s, like 23. I started from a book, actually, because in those days there wasn't yoga. There were no yoga studios. There was no internet. Maybe there was internet, but nobody used it. Yeah, it's pretty funny to think about then versus now. But the word enlightenment kept coming up. And I was in a yoga class finally so I was doing yoga out of a book. And then the town that I lived in started holding yoga classes. There was like one yoga studio that opened up. And I started going to it. And in one of the classes that I was super attracted to going to, this place was magical, really. Very unique place. It was like it was created just for me. I was in a yoga class that I was obsessed with, that they ran 2 days a week. And while I was in an asana, Trikonasana, I had this huge heart opening. And I realized that this was the path to enlightenment. That's not really what I thought. In the moment when my heart blew open, the first thought that I had after was, this is the path. That's it. It was like, this is it. This is all I need. So it led to me studying with those teachers and then their teachers. And that's where became my, that's when the obsession became rooted in wisdom. Okay. And my yoga teachers were Buddhists. So that's how I became a Buddhist. And again, the language within yoga and Buddhism for me and the people that were teaching it around me was all about enlightenment. It was about accessing the aspect of us that never dies, never changes, and that was never born. It's just always been there. And that's what we're tapping into when we talk about infinite supply. So there's one more piece that I want to talk about before I move on from telling you a story. Because so for like 20 years, I've been a yogi and a Buddhist. It's been longer, but like a studied, practiced yogi, proper Buddhist. And in that process, I became a teacher at some point. And I literally was the person in class when the teacher would be like, okay, and now your responsibility is to go teach this to people who want to hear it. I'd be sitting there saying to myself, like, no way. There's no way I'm ever going to teach this. Like, this is just for me. This is my path. This is me. Like, I didn't want to teach it. I just remember thinking, nope, not me. And then I ended up being one of the first teachers in my group. It was crazy. And I like it. I love sharing information and knowledge and then seeing the light bulb go off in people's minds. It's crazy. It's it's not a it's not even a mind thing. When I see it happen, it's like a full body high. It's like a full body recognition. And I can see it in their fullness of their body and their emotional and their spiritual and everywhere. It's like it pervades their whole field. It's incredible. And I know that if I know some of you are teachers, and I'm sure you've seen this experience in your students before. All right. All right. So I'm talking about my why, right? I do this because I'm totally obsessed with enlightenment. So it caused me to seek, right? I became a seeker. And before I became an actual seeker, I was quite into nature, we'll just say. For instance, I lived in the mountains of Northern California, and every day was an outdoor day because it was a very sunny place, even in the winter. And in the wintertime, which was kind of a long season, I would snowboard every day. I was an avid snowboarder. And I would tend to go out by myself because I liked my personal schedule. And I used to call the chairlift my church pew because where I used to live was so beautiful that you couldn't deny that there was a God or a creator being or a creator energy. And I remember looking at the snow and just seeing rainbow colored diamonds. And like I lived on a big lake and you could see the lake from the chairlift. And I mean, I would just sit in the creation of being. So that's why I called it my church pew. But on the main chairlift going up, there are always these trees that I would just stare at. And every day they look different, you know, from like the beginning of the season and all the way through the season to the end of the season, which was springtime, right? And these trees eventually started speaking to me. That's what it felt like. And they were giving me these meditations to do, which I was doing. And when it got really deep, I got freaked out. And I asked God to send me a human teacher. And he did. And it's like they just didn't stop coming. I just kept having teacher after teacher after teacher. And they all seemed realized. And so I realize now in retrospect that when you ask yourself for things in a sincere way and you're open to it, we're constantly receiving. But we have to become receivers. And in that way, we have to keep expanding so that the frequency and vibration can come through us. And that's because these physical bodies are so dense, right? They're so dense, and it's because the frequency, their wave action is slower than, say, mental or emotional frequencies. Okay. But through all this seeking, what happened was I got caught in what felt like a whirlpool. Like I was in this whirlpool and I didn't even know I was stuck there until my soulmate died. And when my soulmate died, I knew that that was the biggest sign that I was ever going to get from the universe in this lifetime. And it's because it was the most painful and at the same time profound. Because I was so connected to him on a level that was so beyond anything I'd ever experienced before, I knew that our relationship was just not ordinary. Plus, he was a monk. Okay. And to honor him and that relationship that I had with the essence of his soul, I knew that this was a nexus point for me personally. And so I vowed to myself not to allow this opportunity to pass me by. Okay. Whew. So life is filled with many types of cycles, right? There's like these mini cycles and these big cycles. And Hari Giri came into my life and out of my life physically. That was a big cycle for me. So I completed one cycle through his death to take on this next cycle. So to finish my why, the reason that I do this and the reason that is that I talk in this manner is because everything is a program, even spirituality. And when we master one program, we tend to create another one because that's how the mind works. And in order to get out of the cycle of programming, you have to understand how the mind programs itself, how it seeks programming, how that programming gets embedded in a pattern so that we can start to create patterns consciously that will then play themselves out in our external material world, because those patterns are created internally. Okay. And that's where the four bodies come into play. So my why is one, I'm obsessed with enlightenment because I want to know everything about being human. I want to master being human so that I can consciously create patterns that I will see play out in the external world. And that's how I believe the universe is created. It's infinite energy creating itself constantly in infinite ways. And so if I have mastered the art of creating through being, for me, that's the game. And super fun because you start to attract all the types of beings that support your joy, support your thriving, support, all the aspects of being you completely. It's amazing. It's so much fun. Okay. So when Hari Giri died, a part of me died too. And that part of me that died was the seeker. And it was at that point I was able to claim my mastery. So remember what I said about contraction and expansion? I was able to stop contracting into I'm small and you're greater, and I'm going to listen to you and you're going to tell me something. I'm going to take it in, integrate it, use it. That all had to end. At that point, I stopped. I sat with everything. And that's when I started to learn how to trust myself. And that's where I feel like a lot of people coming into the world now and coming into their maturity are. Because every generation seemed, even though time isn't linear, in my experience, I see that people coming in are coming into the world, they're being born into the world at a higher frequency. And that has to do with the earth. And that's because the earth is vibrating at a different frequency. And believe me when I say everything is perfect, it's like crazy. And so that's another aspect of infinite supply. It's about relaxing into the understanding that anything that I desire can be created because I'm this infinite being, literally having a human experience. So my power, my purpose here in this class and in all classes that I teach is getting to the root of all things, because I have seen directly how the mind makes up stories about literally everything, including spirituality and enlightenment. And that in order to know that it's actual truth, you have to investigate it. Okay. But I studied for a long time, and I studied scriptures, and I studied textbook after textbook after textbook with Sanskrit scholars and Tibetan scholars, and meditating in caves and meditating alone for a long time. But what I want to do for people is, because I could see from an external perspective that you can take all these ingredients and put them like in a juicer and extract all the big points, the ones that are effective, because there's like as many paths to enlightenment as there are mind streams here available to see them. So that's my why. I'm super passionate about helping people get to their truest self, where they're sitting and they're embodying their original tone and blueprint, that purpose for being here in this life, and not only for existing in that, but feeling confident in being that with no self-doubt, so that they're able to trust themselves. Because this is where it gets interesting. There's an unknown. So we have to be comfortable in the unknown. When you're sitting in the truth of self, you don't know the future. You know you're creating the future in the moment through patterns and mastery. But you don't know exactly what's going to happen or what you're going to need to create in the next moment. You're just releasing all the tension and all the doubt, because you have full trust in your own purity, in your own heart, and how the universal principles work for everybody. Okay? So I do like to tap into those universal principles because they're true for everyone. All right, so what is enlightenment? Another word for enlightenment in my mind is freedom or sovereignty. So that's where the words infinite supply came through. I was listening to one of my mentors talk, and she was talking about infinite supply. And I heard that as freedom. And that's why I titled this talk, How to Harness Your Infinite Supply. So infinite supply is not just material things. It's the fact that we have access to everything in the universe. It's the sense of knowing that anything I desire can be created. And the thing is, we're creating in every moment anyway. But what we're doing is we're creating unconsciously. Right here, right now, I'm creating something. So you can either create it unconsciously or a bit consciously and subconsciously, or you can understand the power of it all and constantly be creating consciously. So it's that energy I want us to tap into today, because it's there that we build the house on a strong foundation. So we're here in these human manifestations to merge with our true selves. So what is that? It is an infinite energy that never dies, was never created, and never changes. So when you go looking for the I that we think we are, we can't find it. But I am not going to bore you with 20 years of Buddhism, okay? I'm just going to give you the juice. So when we tap into our infinite supply, we touch our power of magnitude. We are so magnificent that it cannot be described. And at any time we're not feeling connected to that, it is pointing us directly to it. You know, it's hard to get that when you're in the middle of a mental affliction. And I understand that. But as somebody who lived through an excruciatingly painful experience, I can say that we all have the power to hold both, to hold the emotions that feel like they're trying to kill us, and at the same time, allow them to drive us to our greater aspect of being, to an awareness of that. Okay, and that's alchemy. You're taking one emotion or situation or experience, you're holding it, you're not running from it, and you're turning it into something else, something deeper, something indescribable in this case. It's so much greater than anything else I can explain, that like literal words are lost on it. To be able to harness all of that you are, and to be able to create your own patterns and manifest at will your external reality is amazing. Now, I'm still working on it, but that's the process of the contraction and the expansion. Okay. So in order to access this mastery, we are going to use some ancient wisdom from yoga. Now, yoga is not a practice. It's literally a state of being. So when I was talking about enlightenment before, enlightenment really is yoga. Yoga is a state of being. And if you've studied yoga at all, beyond physical exercises, then perhaps you're familiar with Master Patanjali. Well, he's given the boon for writing what's called the Yoga Sutras. And in the Yoga Sutras, he says right away that yoga is a state in which the mental, emotional fluctuations have become still. So the winds in the body, the prana or the chi, that is happening right now. That is our life force energy. Okay, so that's where we're getting to now in this conversation. We're getting to the nuts and bolts of how we control the winds inside of our body so that we can start to master the patterns. So first thing that has to happen is that we have to understand, just like how I could hold intense grief with profound awareness, We have to understand that we are these infinite beings having a human experience, but that this human body that we are borrowing, so to speak, is going to die. It's finite. So a lot of how and why we can't move forward out of the big cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death is because we haven't come to terms with the fact that this body has a shelf life. It has an expiration date. We don't know when that is. And if we really learn to harness our power, then maybe it will last 100, 200, 300 years. I lived in India for many years and I did meet people well over 100. So, living to 100 is a myth. And those people were not on pharmaceutical medication. So, and they smoked a lot of ganja and bidis. So there you go. So understanding that we're infinite beings in a finite body and making peace with that, with the time that we're here. When we bring that into our awareness, that fear of death that kind of pervades all things ceases to exist in our field. So I like to look at fear as a pointer to truth. This is what I mean when I say that the work I do is at the root level. Cutting the cords to the energetic ties, not serving our highest truth and timeline. And this is the place from which we create from. So far in this talk, we understand infinite supply is our connection to all that is. We are infinite creator beings living in the image of God. We are more than just these bodies. So what are we? We are made up of 4 bodies. Now, let's not get into an argument about that because each body will have a secondary, a third, and in different conversations, people will call it different things. So just tap into the essence of what I'm saying. So these 4 bodies, the first body is the physical body, everything physical about us. Okay, all the functions of the body. I'm going to just move it a little faster now. The mental body. This is the layer created by the mind, which is the holding tank of the conscious and the subconscious. The emotional body. This is where thought becomes a program or a belief system. And this has to do with emotions, okay? The emotional body has to do with emotions. Oh, light bulb. Emotions are either connecting us with source energy or separating us. It really depends on what the emotion is. And this is where we start to develop emotional intelligence. And emotions really are the key. Emotional intelligence is how we harness that infinite supply. And then there's the etheric body or the spiritual body. This is what connects us to all things, including the earth and the self, to what we call God, the universe and beyond, the divine, the higher self. It represents the unity of all living things, including the union between our soul, life experience, and destiny. Okay? Whew. So these 4 bodies are like an instrument. And if one is out of tune, the whole thing is out of tune. So we really want to learn how to tap in to each body so that we can attune them to all the others, so that we make a song. And if you're familiar with yoga, and you know the Sushumna Nadi, the central channel, Sushumna comes from the words susu, which means to sing. So here we are. We're accessing, and this is what yoga is to me, we're accessing all the bodies, tuning them up constantly, and making a beautiful song. And when that song is in alignment, then you are connected to all things, that oneness of being. Now, I could do a whole class on those 4 bodies, and I probably will. But this is really just an overview class because we don't have much time. So, alchemy, first of all, emotions are driving manifestations. Okay, because manifestations are created from image, not from thought. The thought creates an emotion. And alchemy is the transformation in the healing process. So, in order to gain that emotional maturity, we have to do what I was talking about before, which is the alchemy, the transformation. For instance, in my story, between grief and profoundness. So, in all of it, it's if we're going to master ourselves and creation itself, then we have to be willing to take full responsibility for ourselves. And the key here is that we must drop being a victim. We have to take responsibility for everything. That's the real work. That's an internal work. So no matter what happens in our external world, we're not a martyr. Doesn't mean that we're a martyr, but it means that we're not a victim. And that's because we have all the power. And we don't have the power over anyone else. We only have the power for ourselves. And in this part of the path, which I call the warrior's path, we're going to look at the Yamas and the Niyamas, which are the first 2 aids to yoga in Master Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Sometimes referred to as the 8 limbs of yoga. It's really the 8 aids to yoga. And this is where the foundation is built on, because the Yamas are what to give up and what to take up. So the Yamas, restraints, right? What to give up, let go of these habits, and you're on your way to maturity. So that would be spiritual maturity, emotional maturity, the whole shebang. That's Ahimsa, nonviolence, Satya, truth, Asteya, not taking what belongs to you, what doesn't belong to you, Brahmacharya, which is moderation, everything in moderation, Aparigraha, not being greedy, hoarding, taking, constantly consuming content and not actually creating anything. The niyamas are what to take up. They're these observances. So take these qualities up and have a bang in life. Shaucha, purity, santosha, contentment, tapasya, accepting pain but not causing pain. Svadhyaya, spiritual study, and Ishwari pranidhana, devotion to God's source and dedication and service to all of creation. So that sounds good, right? Well, we're only going to focus on 2, Ahimsa and Satya, nonviolence and truth. And that's because when we get to where these 2 are at peace together, we are at peace. Everything else comes from that. So we're going to start by talking about truth, actually, because we're talking about the truth of being. It's truth in the sense, it's not truth in like, don't tell a lie. It's the truth in the sense of speaking your truth and with kindness and compassion, non-violently. So if we were to start a sentence with the word you, like you did this and you did that, and now I feel like this, that's not truth. And that's because you don't know anyone else's truth. You don't know in that moment when they said that thing or did this thing or that thing, what's their backstory? Like what causes them? What did they come with in their baggage to have that happen for them? You only know what's going on for you. So that's what we're focusing on here, the truth of the self. And in that case, you would want to start a sentence with I. Okay. You can see how it gets very deep and how important becoming aware of who you are and your quirkinesses and your thought patterns and the way you do things and how you do them and why you do them becomes very important in order to attain spiritual maturity. So we never know the story behind someone else's words and actions. And since we can't know, how can we start a true statement with you? That wouldn't be true. So we start a sentence with I, and we're saying what's true for us in that moment. So we each have the authority to speak up and speak the truth about what matters to us. And if you don't speak up and speak your truth, no other person is going to know how they impact you. So it's important to let people know how their actions impact us without blaming them, to not assign blame. And this is how we do not establish a causal relationship between you and another person. And that is sovereignty, where somebody else can do whatever they're doing and you are not affected by it in a causal relationship because there's no truth there. They're doing what they're doing based on so many factors. And you experience them based on your factors. So take responsibility for your factors and how you're going to use them to alchemize, to transform, to go deeper within yourself and to become the best, most mature spiritual being that you can be. So, for instance, your boyfriend cheats on you. And instead of saying, you did this to me and you did that, and I feel awful, you say, when you did this action, I felt this way. See, you're taking the responsibility, but there's no assigning blame. But you're speaking up and noting the correlation. But there's no blame or demonization. You did this, and I felt this way. This is alchemy and emotional maturity. Now, you then might turn around and be like, how did you feel when I said that to you? And they could be like, you're a jerk and I hate you. And then you would know, okay, well, they just started the sentence with you. And that's not necessarily true for me. So you don't have to react in a negative way and take that situation down a path that's going to cause a lot of pain. And you can start to see here how the foundation of the house is being built on nonviolence and truth. So the payoff is that the truth means alignment in one's words and actions with what's real for you. Okay, so this is how we start to master ourselves, to master our emotions. And you can see how yoga can help you do that by understanding the universal principles. For instance, here we're just talking very basically about Satya and Ahimsa, about nonviolence and truth. And this, in this time, space, and dimension, in my experience, it's really important to understand speaking up, speaking your truth, and in a nonviolent way. With all this COVID stuff going on, there's a lot of talk on Facebook, and a lot of it, you can just see people, feel people's shadows, just all that stuff they had inside of them is just coming up, and they feel so self-righteous about it. And it's fine, it doesn't affect me. I'm just taking responsibility for myself. So don't be shy when somebody asks you a question to come from a place of not knowing, because mostly, in order to know if something's true for us or not, we need to contemplate it. We need to stop, pause, take a breath, and contemplate and see if it's true for us. And that's, again, an aspect of spiritual maturity. All right. So now we're going to do a meditation where we're going to feel into all these aspects. So we talked about infinite supply, which is connecting with source energy, knowing that we're these infinite creator beings, that infinity is constantly expanding and it's here to create constantly. So here we are experiencing infinity in this finite body. And we have access. What makes humans special is that we have access to being completely aware of this process. But we want to do it in a way that's true for us and non-violently. So we understand the physical body, the mental body, the emotional body, and the spiritual body. And we constantly feel into those and tune them up with each other so that we can come from a place of truth and nonviolence, so that we can feel into our total alignment and come from that place within the heart. And that has a rippling effect out into the collective that is so far beyond anything we could comprehend. And I ask you not to believe me, but to then go take this information and experiment with it. And how I do this is I just ask myself, I literally sit in silence and I ask myself the deep questions and then patiently wait for answers. And the answers are coming through everything in my external world. They're coming internally. They're coming from all of the four bodies. Okay. All right. So now we're going to feel into all these principles and start to step into our self-mastery. Sound fun? Okay. So you want to sit with your back straight because we want the prana to be moving freely through the torso. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. So first we're going to ground our energy into the earth by allowing the air to go through the body on an exhale, and then see it move through the bottoms of the feet into the diamond core of the earth. Then on an inhale, you're going to see the energy move up from the diamond core of the earth, through the feet, up through the body. It's going to pass through the heart, then move up the spine, through the crown chakra, up, up through the 8th chakra, all the way to source energy. And then that energy is going to come back down through the crown chakra, through the heart, and down into the crystal core of the earth. And on your breath, you're going to run that energy So you're pulling up on the energy of the earth through the heart, out through the crown chakra to source energy and back down in the front of the body. And then up and down. So the energy is coming up through the feet from the crystal core of the earth, through the heart, all the way up and out through the crown chakra, source energy, and coming back down through the heart, down through the body, into the crystal core of the earth. We feel grounded and we feel connected. Now just allow your attention to go to the heart. Sit in that space. And just breathe from the heart. Feel the blood pumping through your physical body, your heart beating. Now I'm going to ask you to feel into your moral virtues, the things that you feel are true for you. What are your values? What do you value most in this life? Now feel into those values very deeply. See how your mind is affecting your emotions. Which affects how you feel connected to all things. Allowing that frequency to pervade all four bodies. Become aware of how the emotion of those virtues are emitting the energy throughout the four bodies. And just sit in that frequency. Notice how, from your heart, that energy is rippling out beyond the boundaries of what you think you are as you. See it move out past the room that you're sitting in. And then out of the house. And then through the town. And into your state. See this frequency pervade your entire country. Until eventually the whole planet. And now it's going to go beyond the planet, out into the universe, into the galaxies, into other universes and other galaxies. Really sit with this and feel how expanded you are in this moment. And now start to bring the energy back from all the universes and galaxies to the earth, back to your country and your town, into your house, into your room, and back into your heart. Pause, breathe from the heart. Relax. Now see your four bodies no wider than your two arms stretched out into a T shape, and repeat after me. I am grounded. I am clear. I am grounded. I am clear. I am grounded. I am clear. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So I hope that was good for you and gave you a sense of infinite supply, the power of alchemy and manifestation through self mastery, and how we get there by building a strong foundation based in nonviolence and truth, and how it's possible to master this human existence because we are actually creator beings that are infinite. So there's no need to fear death because that thing within us that never dies is with us all the time, no matter what we perceive ourselves as. And once you start working with these principles and this wisdom, and you understand emotional maturity, you're allowing for more space and expansion and light to come through. And that's how we move and access, not only through this physical manifestation, but through all the dimensions of being. So let me know if you have any questions. You can send me a personal message if you're watching the replay. I'd be happy to connect with you. This is my passion. This is what I work with. And I help people through all the different bodies and to get to that emotional maturity so that they're accessing all of who they are, but in a grounded, clear, positive way. And if you are like me, you tend to attract a lot of, well, in the past, I attracted a lot of adventure and learning until that experience with Hari Giri. And I wanted to stop with the seeking, ground in the lessons I'd learned already, and move forward into my self mastery. That's possible. It's here for us now and always. So I invite you to meet yourself wherever you are in any given moment. Enjoy. Namaste.